Hello, everybody. Welcome into my latest live broadcast. It's Friday, the 7th of June, 2024. Of course, I'm still CareyHolzman. I'm assuming you're still you. I hope so. Listen, it's really hot here in Phoenix. I'm probably going to be sweating throughout this broadcast, and you're probably going to hear the AC unit running the whole time. We're already over 110 degrees. I think the coolest it got last night, I think it got down to 84. I think didn't even break 90 until 2 a.m. I don't know. But when you start the day at 84, it's going to climb. So we're probably in the 100 and teens already, just the first week of June. And then, it'll get worse. July adds the humidity. August adds the most humidity that we get here in Phoenix. And then it starts to go back with lower humidity in September. And then starting to get lower to under the 100 degree Fahrenheit temps in October, usually late October. So we're buckling in. The ride's only just begun. So this is going to be the new normal for a few months. We'll see. Maybe Studio C will be better as far as cooling goes. But in the meantime, if you're wondering, it's hot. Okay. Welcome in, one and all. Thank you guys for your generous contributions, even before the show started and even just now as I'm speaking. So a shout out to our friend Ben Laird joining us from Scotland with a £2 contribution. Says hello from Scotland. Alan Lindas joins us from, Arizona, where it's also very hot, where he is. $15.77 from Alan. Thank you, Alan. He says hello, Carey and Mara and chat. Another scorcher in Arizona today. Yeah. 3D Everything with a $10 super chat says hello, Carey, Mara, and everyone in the chat. Hello, 3D Everything. Nick Caffrey with 10 euros says hello, Carey, Mara, and chat. 15 degrees Celsius, which is 54. Ha! That's half of what we've got. 54 degrees Fahrenheit here in West Cork, Ireland. Right on. Well, thank you, Nick, 3D Everything, Alan, and Ben. You guys rock. A super shout out, of course, to our friend Buster, Peter Laycock, joining us. I don't see him in there yet today, but he joins us regularly, a regular contributor, really helping out a lot with getting Studio C set up. Also, Oystein, Frankie B, and other very generous contributors. I always want to give them credit so that you guys are aware that the free content we're making has to get paid for somehow. So your memberships, your super chat contributions, they help keep us moving forward. Now, initially, I thought my time at Studio B was going to be up in about a week. So the last thing I was going to do was start any new builds, but yet I've got like 3 or 4 builds in the wings. But we've got a little reprieve here, thankfully, because Studio C is well under construction. It's being renovated from ceiling to floor, paint, all of it, fixtures, electrical, and that's going to be a few more weeks. Now, maybe, just maybe, if you're a member on Monday, we do members only videos on Mondays, 1 o'clock Pacific time. And if you remind me, maybe I'll give you a sneak peek at just how much work there is still yet to do. I don't know if I have any pictures of before we started, but I took pictures of where we're at now, and it'll give you an idea of the space we're going to be in. And then you'll be able to see, at least at this point forward, how it's going to change in the next couple of weeks. It should be a pretty drastic change. Hopefully, one that's going to be very nice. So it's certainly looking that way so far. You got to kind of picture ahead, you got to think about how is this going to lay out? How's it going to look? So in my mind, it looks fantastic. It's well on its way. All right, so with that, we did a build a few months ago called projectzero. That was from MSI, and the idea was that all the cabling going to the motherboard would happen on the back of the board instead of the front. So your front port umbilicals, USB headers, audio header, power cables. I don't know why they didn't do this 20 years ago, quite honestly. It does require a case that accommodates holes in the case for where the power cables and USB and umbilicals and all those front port headers you normally plug into the front. They're in the same location, just on the back side of the board. So when trying to find these components, the only place I could find selling MSI's projectzero was Newegg. And they had, this was still new, so they didn't have the full lineup that MSI announced. And we built the micro ATX version of projectzero with a Sama micro ATX white case with an AMD processor. I wanted to do a full-size ATX Intel board, but they weren't out yet, or they weren't available. I think the board was, but the case wasn't. So I said, okay, well, we'll start with this. So we did part 1 and then part 2, and Mitch helped us with building that. And it's beautiful. And the great thing about it is you don't have to use a modular power supply anymore because, quite frankly, all your cables are back behind the board, so who cares? No one's going to see them, and there's no worry about losing your cables or things like that. So for this build, we're going to go a little cheaper on the power supply, and we're going to get into these parts here in a minute. But just to start with the power supply, I've got an EVGA 750 watt non-modular power supply. These are like $60. It's a really good price over at Amazon here in the US. And I've had this one for some time. I just don't like doing all the extra cable management that a non-modular power supply would require on a build that's see-through, like a glass build. So these are great for business machines. Not many business machines would require 750 watts, so it's been sitting for a while. But this is the perfect way to save some money on a build that could easily get out of control. And we're gonna make this a very good build, but not the best, because the best is significantly more money. But I think you'd be hard pressed when you use it to really see any difference. And we'll talk more about that here in just a minute. Ron Barnish renews his membership, now a member for 22 months. Right on. Thank you, Ron. He says specifically a member for 1 year, 10 months, and 3 days. But who's counting? And Tim Davern renews his membership, now 24 months. Says hello and happy Friday. Thank you, Tim. Of course, thank you to Ron as well. And David Graham with a $2 super chat says hello, Carey and everyone. Welcome in, David. Good to see you. All my friends in blue, folks in white. If you're wondering what's up with all the blue folks, those are either members. If you see the gold badge next to their name, that means they pay $9.99 a month to help support the channel, so we don't have to become a puppet for corporate America, saying what they want us to say when they want us to say it, and reviewing what they want us to review, and then we get a big check from them. Instead, we get a little tiny bit of financial support from you guys. And while I'm not going to make as much money that way, I do feel I have more control over my videos and my honesty and my integrity without selling out. There's enough of that on YouTube in the tech sector, so that's been covered quite well. If you want that kind of commercialism, you can find it easily here on YouTube. I'm a real-life working computer technician. I've been doing this for over 30 years. And while my opinions may not be agreeable to you, they are coming from a place where I'm held accountable, where I have to support these machines indefinitely, whether in warranty or out. I do hope my customers call me back. And ideally, I want them to be happy and refer me, because marketing is very expensive and, in my experience, ineffective. So referrals are the best way to go. The best way to get a referral is have a happy customer. The best way to have a happy customer, I have found, is to set their expectations and then meet or exceed the expectations you and the customer set, right? We agreed before we build, this is what it's going to cost. This is when it's going to be ready. It should be very reliable, on time, et cetera, et cetera. If you do everything you said you were going to do, deliver it to the customer when you promised, for the price you promised, customers should love you. Customers should refer you to their friends. Their customers should come back for more when they're ready. And hopefully, if you build it right, you won't have any warranty calls. That'll happen if you're trying to make more profit by buying cheaper parts. So I'm not buying the most expensive parts, but I am buying the parts that I find are the best value for me, to my standards. And of course, if you want to build a system like this, you can change the RAM and the storage and the processor and the power supply. You really just need the motherboard in accompanying case. Because it is this projectzero, it's a bit unique in Well, it's very unique in how it all goes together with regards to the board and the case. Those must be compatible. If this catches on, this may be the new normal. Asus has their Back to the Future, that's what they call it, I guess, rear mounted cables. I haven't seen any of them in person. I expect ASRock and ASRock and Gigabyte, I assume, will follow through with their versions. And hopefully they put all the ports in the same place so that a case that works with one should work with the others, but that remains to be seen. So to be cautious, we've got the board from MSI, this projectzero board, and a case that MSI, I'm not sure if they make it or what their relationship is with the manufacturer. They're called SAMA, S-A-M-A, and a very reasonable price on everything. The rest of the parts are all standard everyday parts. It's only the motherboard and the case that change, and what a difference it makes. Now, if you missed the original projectzero build that was a micro ATX AMD build, go back and watch it. That was a white themed case, a white themed build. This will be black full-size ATX Intel. The other was AMD. We had some great support from our friend Luke Greenia joining us from Vermont, who offered to buy the original projectzero. He was, if you've been a member of the channel, you've been seeing him drool over it for months. So we worked out a deal. It got sent via FedEx. The price to ship and box, we put a box in a box, right? So we put the computer back in its original case box. And then going from Phoenix all the way to the East Coast, I laid that box flat into a bigger box. And still it arrived with some damage. That was $190 for the shipping and the packing. That was the cheapest I could find with FedEx Ground. It took over a week to get there. Luke received it. The box looked fine. He said there was no damage on it. However, when he opened it up, we did have some damage. So let me share this photo that Luke shared with me, because I've never seen this occur before. This is a new one. What we've got is the stock AMD fan, the CPU fan. The actual fan popped off of the cooler. Now, Luke says it just snapped back on and everything seems to work. But what the heck did FedEx do to cause that? That's just crazy. That's not a third-party fan. That's the stock OEM AMD fan in a double-boxed system that had instructions to keep the fan side up. I didn't want that box shipped upside down. That doesn't mean that's how they handled it. But in theory, if the send to address is on the top of the box, right, and the motherboard is laying flat inside of this bigger box, the whole other case is laying flat with the motherboard on the bottom side and the address on top. That means for FedEx or whoever is delivering it to see where it's going, they have no choice but to flip it the right way around. Now, if they put it on its side to make it fit in the truck, that shouldn't matter one way or the other. But if they put it in the truck upside down and it bounced around FedEx ground, means it's going by truck nearly the entire length of the United States to the East Coast. I suppose enough of the bumps could have broke that free. When you put this side up on a package, it's a suggestion. They don't necessarily obey it. That's why I don't ship with graphics cards anymore. Graphics cards are big and heavy. They break free all the time. Even when they don't break free, you know, we had a system we sent to Mike Smith in Florida a while back, and it looked fine, but the video card was broken. And to this day, I don't know what was wrong with it. So Mike had to send the video card back to me so I could RMA it back to, I think it was Gigabyte who made that video card. And in the meantime, Mike needed the system, so he ran to a local Best Buy, bought the equivalent video card, popped it in himself, and everything was fine. So no more video cards, and probably no more shipping. The shipping's getting ridiculously expensive. FedEx hasn't really delivered 80% of my packages on the estimated day. It doesn't matter where in the United States they're going. I sent an overnight letter that was very important. It was supposed to arrive on the 31st of May. I shipped it on the 30th. and it didn't arrive until the 4th of June. What? $47 to mail essentially an envelope overnight. I could have got it there about the same or faster with USPS priority mail. Maybe I should call FedEx and complain and get some kind of refund. I don't know how that works, but what can you do? You know, once it's out of my hands, once it's in the hands of the shipper, it's on them to get it there. And a day late's one thing, but to pay that kind of money and then just have it arrive like a regular first class envelope is insulting. And you think, well, this can happen. Maybe their truck was in an accident or something. I don't know. But then to have all the other computers I've shipped, very few of them actually arrived when they said they were going to. And for the money they're charging, which is more than I've ever paid before, I think I'm done with it. And then you combine it with, in a couple cases, some damage. So yeah, I mean, what can I do? But we're also going to do fewer builds. As I mentioned, the builds aren't really generating any more views, let's say, than other content I make, but they cost a lot of money to make. And then trying to sell them afterwards is difficult, either because of the added cost of shipping, which, you know, takes out the bargain of buying it, right? You could put it together yourself far cheaper. When you order parts from Newegg or Amazon, you're going to get free shipping on those parts, including the big case. For me to just ship the case to you is like $60, just the way it ships to me for free from Amazon or Newegg. So it's not a very good model for a small business person to go after. However, I haven't really made up my mind on this yet, but you might see a shift with regard to fewer and fewer builds as we move through the rest of this year and next year. And then we'll see how the culture in the viewers of YouTube, how they, what their interests become, or if they return back to this. And then we'll be flexible and adapt accordingly. Right now, we've got about 3 or 4 other builds, including this one, that remain to be done. And these are a little bit more difficult to test outside of the case. If you go back and watch the first projectzero build, it's a little challenging to get to the back of the board while at the same time leaving the heatsink available so the fan can spin. It's always best to build these in their cases, but that if I do that, you guys at home will have a hard time seeing what I'm doing. By doing it here on an open countertop, it's much more valuable education-wise how things are going together. So that's why I do it that way on camera. If this wasn't on camera, this isn't how I would do it, just to get that out of the way. Daryl Hover says a friend in Mississippi shipped an all-in-one Dell to California. Shipping was over $400. Well, as long as it didn't arrive damaged, I'm sure FedEx Ground would not have been that much money. It sounds like UPS or some other shipper was involved. If you ship, put tons of bubble wrap around it. Yes, well, we do that, but also remember that that bubble wrap, you can't let the bubble wrap be inside of the case, right? So that picture I showed you with the fan coming off, that wouldn't have changed anything. Because if they dropped that box from a distance or shook it long enough day after day for that fan to break free, regardless if there was bubble wrap, there's just nothing you can do about it. Same with a video card. You know, the best thing you can do if you have to ship a video card is take it out, put it back in the original box and have the customer install it. And even then, it still may arrive damaged. Did you put a fragile sticker throughout the box? Again, when you put stickers on the box, whether it says this side up or fragile, the folks that are doing the work, the heavy lifting and delivery, don't necessarily respect those stickers. Some do, some don't. It's not really enforced. They're trying to work quickly. They've got a lot of packages to get through. They're paid generally by the hour. And they're typically in a hurry. So again, you can put stickers on the box. I don't find that necessarily makes any difference. Ben Laird said across the U.S. in a truck, that is a long drive. Yeah, it's that's why I didn't deliver it personally. It probably would have cost me more than that in gas and hotels, certainly more than $190. But I wouldn't have had to pack it. I could put the raw computer right in the trunk and it would have been fine. But then there's gas and hotels coming back, plus there's 3-4 days of being on the road and 3 or 4 days coming back, which is about the same time FedEx took to get it there to begin with. So economically, it makes more sense. Plus, if I'm driving 10 hours a day for 3 or 4 days there and 3 or 4 days back, you guys go, where did Carey go? It's been over a week without any content. So I'm spending money, but I'm not making it. And, that's why for a lot of these systems, if I sell them, they're going to have to go local. It's just getting way too expensive, and the risk of damage and the fact that the damage that we've seen so far has been minimal, we're lucky, but there shouldn't be any damage at all in a double box system. But it is what it is, and we'll react accordingly. And, the only one making any money here is FedEx. But we appreciate Lou Greenia for supporting the channel in that way. And he's got it all up and running, and he'll report back to us on what it's like to live with day to day. Should be a great system. Frank Jimmy says, I've sold empty computer cases, shipped it across the country from Florida to California, completely wrapped in layers of bubble wrap, and it still arrived damaged. Yeah, I found that to be true with UPS. FedEx, usually the boxes look beautiful when they arrive. I've had people take pictures with their phone, make videos like Mike Smith unboxed a video, did an unboxing video of what I sent him in Philadelphia, and the box didn't have any marks or dents or anything. I think the problem was that projectzero is a wider case, and so it ends up being a much bigger box than what I normally send. So say a Corsair 200R is thinner. So the box it goes in is thinner, and it doesn't take up as much room on the truck. And I think what FedEx is charging and why it was so much money is not just the weight, because it really didn't weigh any more than any other computer build. It's that you've got this whole section about this wide behind the motherboard tray for all your cables to plug in and have cable management. And it changes the dimensions of the PC. It's quite a bit wider. As a result, it needs to go into a wider box that takes up more room on the truck. So combined with how much it weighs, the package, what the dimensions of the package are and how far it's going and how you want to ship it, via air or ground, these all play into factors on what the cost is going to be and if you want to insure it. I think for me, my observation is the biggest cost is the size of the box. That seems to make a pretty noticeable difference by up to 30-40%. I'd say 30% of the shipping price when the box is simply 4 inches taller. So I understand it takes up more room in the truck. They can't get as much in there. So these are all factors that add up to that shipping cost. Anyway, enough of that. Retro Console wants to know, how would you ship mechanical hard drives? If they shake those things, would they go bad inside? Generally speaking, mechanical hard drives are only fragile when they're powered up, when they're running. So if you've got a drive connected, a mechanical drive, and say it's USB and you knock it over, you accidentally hit it with your foot, it doesn't have to go far. Just a little bit could damage it. The heads are floating less than a human hair away from the platter. It's very close. And the slightest bump, they make contact, and that's pretty much it. So I like SSDs for those reasons. If I was going to ship mechanical hard drives, I would wrap them in thick bubble wrap for 2 inches on all sides and put it in a box where it doesn't move around. But the heads will be parked and it should be fine. Alternately, if you order brand new drives, look at how they ship those drives. Save the box and packing that the hard drive came in, and you can reuse that at a future date. And that's the best way. That'd be the bubble wrap's the second best way. Hard drives aren't worth very much money anymore. I don't know that it wouldn't cost you as much to send a drive in the mail, mechanical, that it would be to just order from Amazon and have it shipped for free. But, you know, it depends on the size and age of the drive. In most cases, it's just not worth it. It doesn't make financial sense. Tim wants to know what I charge for building a system. So I'm really not doing any builds anymore for customers unless they're local. I cannot ship outside of the United States. I've explained this numerous times before, but there's going to be an import fee that your government's going to charge. So not only will you pay for the shipping, but then your government's going to hold it hostage for 30 days. You have 30 days to pay the import fee. We don't know what the import fee will be until your customs figures it out. And then if you don't pay it, they send it back to me. And if you have any damage or need any support, there's not much I can do. So most countries discourage you ordering electronics and certain things into the country. They make it more expensive because they want you to support your local economy. So there's a few countries that don't have an import fee, but most of Europe has them. And it's just not a worthwhile thing to do. Find someone local to build it would be my advice, because you're going to need that support, and the warranty isn't going to apply for US parts in the UK. From the manufacturers, you know, the motherboard, hard drive, storage, all of that stuff will be a US warranty, and you won't be able to apply that in the UK. Captain Thriller says, do I still sell the case stickers? That's at CareyHolzman.com. You can find what's available there. My sister handles all of that. I don't know anything about it. But yes, they are still available. CareyHolzman.com. All right. Thank you for the questions, guys. My friend Ron joins us. He says, I'm vibrating. I just slammed a 911 from Dutch Brothers, which is six espresso shots. Mara and I call that having coffee babies. I don't drink coffee or tea, so enjoy your caffeine buzz and your headache later. Let's see. Peter joining us from, is it Amsterdam's? Renews membership. Now a member for 12 months. He's got the 12 badge. Right on. Thank you, Peter. Mara says the previous projectzero videos have been linked and added to a playlist here on this video. Thank you, Mara. Raymond says, I see a bit of money on the table. Yeah, let's talk about that. What are we building today? All the links for the parts I'm about to show you are in the video description of today's video, which you can click on at any time if you haven't already. And let's start with the case. This case isn't really that much bigger than the Micro ATX case. I'm surprised how big the Micro ATX case was when I shipped it. But let's go to the window capture mode here. Here we go. Now, I can only find the projectzero stuff on Newegg. I don't have an affiliate account with Newegg. Don't assume, please don't assume that because I provide a link, I'm making a commission. I'm providing that there for your convenience so you don't have to hunt this down, but not because I'm making any money on it. I'm doing it for you guys. If you see an Amazon link or other links, yes, I do make a small commission. It doesn't affect your price. But if Amazon doesn't offer it, it's not like I don't have the attitude if I'm not getting paid. I'm not sharing the link. I'm not going to do that to you. So I did buy this from Newegg. 85 bucks, very reasonable price for this case. All of your ports, everything are at the bottom of the case, right on the foot there on the bottom front of the case. The three fans, let's see. These three fans are pre-installed and the rear fan is pre-installed. The top is an all-in-one cooler that looks like a 360. And if you notice, that's actually not right, is it? Why is there a power cable right here on a projectzero build? You should not have this cable. I just realized that. What the heck? Well, you can put a regular motherboard in this. You don't have to put the rear mounting connectors on it. But it's weird that they would promote it that way. All right, that's how it arrives. Yeah, that's a good deal for 85 bucks. It'll cost me 85 bucks to ship that case, and they're going to include the shipping for free. Yeah, how do I compete with that? The motherboard. Let's talk about that for a minute. Well, it is a black case. We're going to add a little bit of white because we don't have a choice. So this motherboard from MSI is the projectzero Intel Socket 1700 full-size ATX motherboard that MSI offers. You don't get a lot of selection in that regard. It's sort of like ATX with Intel and ATX with AMD, micro ATX with Intel, micro ATX with AMD. That's it. And they look like what they look like. They don't know how successful this is going to be, so I imagine there could be lots of variety if it sells well. Otherwise, if it's still like a niche product, then it may be fewer options to pick from. Now, this board is pretty well decked out with some features here that, as far as I can tell, just lacking in Gen 5 NVMe. It does take DDR5 RAM, but it looks like just Gen 4 on the M.2s, but you get 4 of them. So pros and cons. It does include Wi-Fi. We got a variety of USB ports on the back, 7.1, I believe, surround sound. And of course, 2.5 gig wired LAN connection, and even an old school, wow, look at that, an old school PS2 port for a keyboard or a mouse. I haven't used one of those in forever. I would always use USB. This also has the BIOS flashback button, which we've demonstrated in other videos. And the writing next to the ports tells you a little bit about the ports and their speeds. So I guess these blue ones will be 5 gigs per second. This red one is 10 gigs per second. And this bottom one, 20 gigs per second. And the Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi 7. Now, when it comes to the processor, you'll probably find most YouTube channels, they're enthusiasts, and they're going to use the K processors, 14900K. It costs quite a bit more to get a 14900K versus a 14900. And the 14900 includes a standard OEM air cooler. Is that cooler enough? We're going to find out. If it is enough, or it isn't enough, we still may end up putting an all-in-one 360 cooler in there. I haven't made up my mind yet. We'll see what it looks like and how it runs. I don't like to speculate, but I'm prepared for the worst. $580. That includes the chip and the fan and the thermal materials already on there. It's ready to plug and play to use. 8 cores, performance cores, 16 efficiency cores. That's a total of 24 because you get hyper-threading on these 8 cores that makes it look like, well, that math ain't right. If you get hyper-threading on the 8 performance cores, that would be 16. And then the 16 efficiency cores don't hyper-thread, so that would be 32 total cores, according to my math. CPU speed max of 5.4 gigahertz, which is nothing to shake a stick at. Yeah, here we go. So threads versus cores, that's correct. 24 cores, 32 threads. What's the next link? Oh, okay, so the EK Nucleus all-in-one, a little bit pricey. But if the air cooler doesn't look right or it doesn't perform to my standards, we have one of these ready to go. I still have a couple of these Thermalright contact frames. I like putting them in. I think they're kind of a waste of money. But if you're an extreme overclocker, you might see more value in it. I don't know. I might as well use it. They're very inexpensive. They don't seem to cause any harm. And I kind of enjoy putting them in, if I'm honest. It's a weird thing. For RAM, I've got the OLOy RGB RAM. It's a 32 gig kit. Now mine's rather slow. I think mine's a 4800 megahertz, but I couldn't find it available anywhere. But it should be fine. And this is the closest thing I can find. It looks the same on the outside. It's just a little better performing. And it's probably like a few dollars more than what I paid. I can't remember what I paid, but that'll be the RAM we're using. What is this? Oh, the Fanxiang 2 terabyte NVMe. I've had really good experience with these drives. They've been running on a variety of systems, and I haven't had one fail yet. So they're very aggressively priced, very fast Gen 4 drives. Why pay more? And then finally, the power supply. Look at that, $60 for 750 watts. It's only a 2-year warranty, but you know, I haven't had power supplies go out very often from EVGA regardless. So what a good deal that is. All right, let's go back over to camera 1. There we go. And let me take a quick look in the chat. David Graham says he's got a 4 terabyte Fanxiang NVMe drive. It's running great. Good to hear. It's not just me. I always like to hear if you guys have experiences with any of these products, that you share your experience with us, because they're real, they're genuine. So it's not just a matter of what I think, but also what the actual people spending their money think it meets your expectations, if you would recommend it, if you regret it. We appreciate your input. Okay, so I suppose I can get to building now. I think I'm caught up with your comments. Let me just check the phone real quick before we move on. Yeah, I think we're caught up. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. I'm in the wrong folder. All right, nah, we're caught up. Sometimes I forget to check that during these live broadcasts, and then I feel really bad that some people had contributed and I missed giving them credit and saying thank you. So trying to be more aware of that moving forward. Let's take a quick look. So to start, get the motherboard out of the box. I've already downloaded the latest BIOS from MSI. This BIOS is dated the 30th of May, so it's pretty new. It also says it's a beta. So I'm curious if that's going to resolve some of the over voltages that's going on from the manufacturers, causing these 13th and 14th gen Intels to be overheating. It's something you can control if you manually set it in the BIOS. It's a bit technical, and every motherboard manufacturer does it differently and labels it differently. It's very confusing. We need these BIOSes to come out running stock Intel voltages for the PL1 and PL2. Intel has requested their board partners do that, and they wanted it done by the end of May. Will they do it? I don't know. But in the meantime, using the latest BIOS, let's see what kind of voltages the chip's going to get. If your Intel chip is running hot, it's likely because the BIOS is sending too much voltage to it. If I send too much voltage to you, you'll probably get hot too. They say that executions in an electric chair often result with smoke coming off the top of the person's head. So when we add electricity, when we add power, we're creating heat. If it would deliver the power Intel recommends, that should not be a problem. Your mileage may vary. They put this in a pretty nice box, the projectzero from MSI. And this should work with 12th, 13th, and 14th generation Intel chips. The 15th generation will use a completely different socket, and that'll probably be out in about 6 months. So that these socket 1700 boards from Intel will then be, I wouldn't say obsolete, but probably less desirable for the people who want the latest and greatest, because they'll remain 12th, 13th, and 14th gen compatible. There won't be any new 12th, 13th, or 14th gen innovations. So if you put a 12th gen, you could upgrade to a 13th or a 14th at a later date. But the minute you want to go to 15th, it's a different socket. You'll have to go to a different board. So we know that going into it, and keep that in mind when you're budgeting, you know, what you're getting for the money and where its limits are. And this can be true for really most of the Intel boards for the last few generations, where the boards are good for about 3 generations, and that's it. So in the world of Intel, that's maybe 3 years, 2.5 years, 3 years. And then we're on to the new socket. I don't know many people that ever upgrade their CPU. But if you're buying a 12th, 13th, or 14th gen today, it's going to feel like, I don't know, like you just bought it when the 15th gen comes out. But it's not like there should be that big of a difference in performance. Things like neural processing units with AI, that's all the buzzwords. And if you're not using that, you're not going to miss it. And the performance difference should be negligible. So I wouldn't feel any remorse, buyer's remorse, getting this stuff today. It's not like there's more than about a 10% difference in performance from one Intel generation to the next. So the latest and greatest will always cost more. When it first comes out, a lot of people want it. There's a low inventory, so it may be hard to get. It'll be sold out. It'll be selling at the highest price. And because 15th gen will be a new way Intel's doing things, we may have those brand new product, what do we want to call that? First generation bugs? Oh, no, that's not the right word. It will be, 15th gen will be drastically different in how they're made. And so there may be some growing pains in that first year. So if you want to be first and you want to pay the most amount of money and wait in line to buy it, and then deal with the compatibility issues or whatever comes up with first gen products, know to expect that, right? There wasn't any major difference all the way through basically, you know, the last 10 or 12 generations of Intel. It's more or less just 10% faster on average. And the socket type will change, and, you know, going from Gen 3 NVMe to Gen 4 to Gen 5, Wi-Fi 5 to Wi-Fi 6 to Wi-Fi 7 if it's built on the board. These kind of chipset changes, the number of lanes, things like that. Most average consumers won't see much difference from one generation until you get about, I'd say 4 or 5 generations ahead. Then you're like, hey, this is faster than my old system. So yeah, they got a, MSI has really nice packaging on this board. This looks like it opens like a book. It does. It'll look pretty much the same when we put it in the case. No cables, but we will have a heatsink right here. Okay. This out. Even the box is like, hey, look, you don't even see any of the spare parts. What's in here? Anything? I think that's just for protection. And then, isn't that clever? We've got our Wi-Fi antenna, go faster stickers, some SATA cables, looks like some M.2 screws, manuals, No way. What? They packaged a DVD in here? Intel motherboard drivers and utilities. Did we just go back in time? These are going to be old and outdated, and there's no place to put a DVD drive on a projectzero case. I don't think somebody thought this through. Make a great coaster. I can't really see if there's anything else in here. I wish that would come out. And then these little cardboard boxes that surround it. Oh my God, did they put stuff in there? It looks like they're just visually attractive package cushion. Same with this one up here and up here. It worries me that there might be something in there, but I'm assuming any accessories would be down in here, but I just kind of have to feel around in it. I actually prefer that they just put the darn parts down here. I don't need this box to look pretty. We're never going to use it again. So who knows how much extra cost this adds? Completely unnecessary for trash. All right. Not even sure how I can reuse that box to hold the cables without stripping all the smaller boxes out of it, to hold all the spare parts. So I guess I'll just leave them on the table. Get the board out. Ooh, board's kind of heavy. Okay, I had a pair of scissors in here. Them in the wrong side. Well, I'll find them later. All right, let me bring this up to the camera so you guys can get a close-up. We'll look at it together. I've never seen this in person before. This is a first time unboxing. Also, all the parts we're using are brand new, sealed in the box. So if we have anything dead on arrival or any issues, this is all live, unscripted, unrehearsed. It's all very real. Oh, it's not white, it's silver. Okay, that's cool. Which way do I hold it? This way? You'll notice what really makes this different are all the connectors on the back. SATA ports, power, USB 3, 12-volt CPU power, fans, all of that you would traditionally see on the front are all hidden here on the back, but you'll never see them. Really nice, clean build. You'll see that again on the original projectzero build we did. Only this one's a little bigger. We've got more PCIe slots with an ATX case. We've got more M.2 slots. And then our I/O shield is already built in, so we don't have to put that in. But I hold this any more awkwardly. Challenge accepted. Now, I suppose I need that box back because I want to build on the box. The reason I build on the box is I don't want to scratch up the countertop. It's scratched enough. But since the box is worthless to me, we can scratch up the bottom of the box till the cows come home, as they say. Now, I believe all four NVMe slots are going to be Gen 4. I don't really think it matters which one we use. I generally will go right to the one closest to the CPU. Sometimes on some boards, you've seen me go down in this corner. It depends on the manufacturer of some slots are faster than others, or a lot of times this slot may share bandwidth with the first PCIe slot. And if you're going to be a gamer, you might not want to share the bandwidth. Depends on the graphics card, depends on the user. But we're going to use onboard graphics on this build, but with a 750 watt power supply, we can always add a graphics card at a later time. And we if the graphics card is in any way hindered by performance due to the NVMe, it's easy to just move it, to move the NVMe. Now, I do have my overhead camera charged up today. In theory, we can go to the overhead and you can watch me build this from a top-down point of view. Unless there's some surprises waiting. One way to find out. So what I have to do, this is a little bit behind the scenes here of how we do this. Without a camera person here, I just have this overhead camera that I have to bring down so I can reach it. Because when it's up over the frame where you guys can't see it, it's too high for me to be able to turn it on and adjust it to get it in frame. Once we move to this camera, however, obviously your view will be the top down. This thing could be right in my line of sight. You wouldn't even see me on camera one without this blocking me. But that's a sacrifice I make for you guys to get the best possible view. I have to figure out which of these buttons turns it on. There it goes. Okay, hold steady as we get this adjusted. Hopefully you won't get motion sick from it. Yikes. If I bring this towards me, can I bring this towards me too? Wow. Whoops. How am I going to do this? I guess I have to push this away from me. Not looking right. See that if I straighten this camera out, I have to... Oh no, that actually works better for me. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit. Closer? No. Still not straight on for some reason. Try that. Oh, I see what's happening. There it is. Close enough. I can mess with that for an hour before I get it right. At some point, you got to say good enough. All right, it should stay motionless now. I apologize if you're feeling a little bit motion sick there. But I can't do it any other way currently. There's no way for me to adjust that where only I can see it, unless I was about 10 feet tall. Despite the rumors, I am not tall. Okay, so where do we start? NVMe drive? Sure, why not? I have a JIS #1 Philips head, Japanese industrial standard. Slightly different from an American #1 Philips. An American #1 Philips might do the job, but this just sits so much better in those tiny screws on laptops and on M.2 drives, in my experience. And they're under $10. We're going to use the Fanxiang S880. It's a Gen 4 drive. It's over 7,300 megabytes per second, which pretty much maxes out the Gen 4 performance ability, and very, very aggressively priced. Good warranty. I've never had to use the warranty. I believe it's a 5-year warranty on these, if I'm not mistaken. Most NVMe drives are 5 years. Again, all brand new products. I am unboxing everything live on camera without any rehearsal. So you can get an idea of what to expect if you're doing what I'm doing. There used to be a time where getting a bad part was rather common 20, 30 years ago. Today, manufacturing has improved so much that getting a bad product these days is unusual unless you're buying something used or you're buying it from a questionable source. So if you're buying from a reputable source like Amazon, Newegg, Best Buy, Micro Center, places like that, everything will probably go okay. The minute you buy return product or buy product from, Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp, Craigslist, I don't know. I think you think you're saving money when in fact you may not have any warranty and you may be getting scammed. So for me, I need peace of mind because I'm running a business. I can't afford to get scammed. There's not enough profit in this for me to take those kind of losses and stay in business. I don't want to gamble with my future. We got some documentation to give us a little screwdriver and a screw under there, which we won't need. We're going to use everything that came with the board. Nice to have extras though. That screwdriver's trash as far as I'm concerned. It's uncomfortable, it's difficult to use. Okay, there's our drive. And I got to get my glasses so I can sees. Anytime I got to do fine, detailed work or read text of a certain size, I used to be able to read that stuff without a problem. These days, well, may not be immortal. All right, so let's see. This way, we have quick releases here, so we don't even need to use screws. I like it. Even better. So this will go in here like this. Put it in on a little bit of an angle. Kind of wiggle and push until it seats. Lower this down. And then close this latch. That's it. All done. Right? Crazy. The bottom of the heatsink, and this is why I don't buy these with heat sinks, because there's already heat sinks all over the board. These are better heat sinks and they aesthetically match everything. So why pay extra for a drive with a heat sink only to have it look uglier and not perform as well as the heat sinks your board comes with? Unless your board didn't come with some, right? A cheaper board, for example. It's part of what you're paying for. You pay less, you get less. You got to look at more than just the price. Or you might end up with some consequences you hadn't considered until after the fact. All right, so that protective tape we've just removed that reveals the side of this thermal tape that'll help stave off the heat here. And that little hole, I'm guessing, is cut out for this piece here. So I guess this must go on. Now, if you looked closely, there was a latch on this side, and that's for a 110 millimeter length NVMe drive, which I think I've seen those once in my life. But the 2280, 22 millimeters wide, 80 millimeters long is your standard size, most common NVMe M.2 drive. Okay, drive is installed. I guess we could CPU frame. I remember there was an order I did this in to make my life easier, and now I can't remember what it was. Well, such is life. We'll figure it out. So there's really no reason for me to use the CPU frame, honestly. I don't think it's going to make any difference whatsoever, but I kind of like putting them in. I like how they look, and nobody's going to be upgrading the CPU. Because if you did, you'd have to take the contact frame back off, which requires this tool. And you want to make sure when you're taking the screws out, pay attention to how tight they are. They're not as tight as you'd think. You don't want to over tighten. You want to put them back as close as you can to the same amount of tension they had when you took them off. So for most people, don't do this. It's delicate work. It's unnecessary work. if you're a tinkerer and you like challenges, you know, have some fun. But performance-wise, you're not going to see any difference unless you are an extreme overclocker, in which case you would not be doing a 14900. You'd be doing some processors that ends in a K, KF, KS, something like that. It would have a K in it to indicate it's overclockable. I'm going to set this here. We're going to reuse those screws. That's why no screws come with this. I suppose I need to get the CPU out and ready. Let me move this over here for a second, and let's go to, look how big the box is. And it's this big because there's a big air cooler in there. This side has a single little piece of tape to cut. All brand new. Nothing up my sleeve. Guess I'll just turn the box upside down. Yeah, it's a nice package. Here's our CPU. Just pull that right out. Yeah, it's kind of unusual to see a 14900 in a YouTube video. I can't recall ever seeing one before. They're always 14900Ks, so curious what the cooler looks like. It should be much bigger than an i5. Oh, it is. Wow. It even comes with a different. Wow. I did not know this. What? What? Okay. So I guess we can still use the socket frame. I don't think that makes it. Can we? Yeah. So essentially, the socket has a plate that holds the socket on, and then this has a plate like a liquid cooler. I've never seen that before. Wow. Wow. Have you guys seen this before? Oh, it must be RGB. Yeah, we've got ARGB on this and power. Can you tell? I was not expecting this at all. And we've got our documentation, and I think that's all there is. And then I guess some little piece of foam here to keep things from bouncing around in the box. Clever. Very clever. All right, let me get this empty box out of my way. All right, I gotta think about how I'm gonna do this. Don't mind me, I'm just making this up as I go. Ooh, hold on a second. Let's go to camera 1 here for a moment. Okay, sweating. It's hot in here. Paul Connolly says, do my eyes deceive me? Carey's using an i9 processor. Oh, we've been using i9s now for about 3 or 4 years. Where have you been? Depends if we're doing a budget build or a high-end build. So builds like the MSI Meg motherboards would be i9s. The NZXT Blackout that I did is an i9 14900K. We've done a number of 13900Ks. The 13500 I think is the most reasonable value, but you won't see any i3s. Now, If you see some i3s, you should wonder, who is that person and what have they done with Carey? At least as far as a build goes. Like if something comes in for repair or something is a pre-built, I don't have control over what they pre-built it with. Bill Sony T joins membership. Right on. Thank you, Bill. Sure that Mara turns you blue in there. Let me get a colder Gatorade, because one of the issues I have in a hot room is my drinks don't stay cold as long. And as you see, I kind of nurse at them. I don't chug them. So yeah, got to keep walking back and forth to get a cold one. All right. Just checking in the chat room here to see what I've been focused on the board, so I've been missing what a lot of you have been saying. So apologize if you feel I'm ignoring you. It's difficult to do both at the same time. Somebody's name I can't pronounce says, loving that motherboard. Yeah, I got no complaints so far. Still trying to catch up over here before we continue. And I'm also trying to cool down a little bit. Luke Greenia says he's loving his projectzero build. We're off to a good start, Luke. Hopefully it'll stay that way. Break out the bandana. Yeah. I'm gonna look like that Richie Sambora. Who does that? Santana? Sambora, Santana? All right, let's go back to the overhead camera and continue on. Okay. I am pretty well zoomed in here, but I think I need to be. The problem is I keep pushing the motherboard further away from me to get it lined up with the camera. And it's hard because I can only reach that far. That's my arm extended all the way out. I would not normally work with the board a foot and a half away. Very difficult way to work on the board. But if I bring it closer to me, then you guys can't see. So bear with me. This is harder than it normally would be. This is not the way I would normally do this. So let's take a look here. First things first, we're going to open this up. That opens that way. And I want to put the CPU in now. So we'll grab our CPU here. There's a little cutout in a corner. Yep. And it should go in this direction. Now, I do see the little golden triangle right there. But then there's a gold dot that, if your eyes aren't very good, looks like a triangle as well. But I typically know that the writing is going to face the same direction as all the writing on the board. So on Intel build, at least with micro ATX and ATX modern Intel builds, you can usually tell how the chip goes in with the writing all facing the same way. Like things on the board that say, for example, HDMI. Sometimes there's a model number in here I can't see, but all that writing, the projectzero, how it faces you, should also match the direction of the CPU on Intel CPUs. Now there's also the triangle here And there should be a triangle on the board. I don't see it. It's probably on the socket. Well, it's on the socket cover right there in the corner. If you got a really sharp eye, it's embedded in the plastic. But that's another way that you can tell. Because when we put the CPU socket frame on, the writing's all going to be in the same direction. We also have that triangle. And the CPU is going to already have to be installed because this is going to apply pressure equally around the CPU rather than the Intel's default socket frame here, which if I turn this around, maybe you can see, just has these pieces here to hold on to these ears. And what they say is when you're really overclocking, getting this thing hot, it can bend in the middle because it's rectangular. AMDs are square, so they don't bend in the middle. But because there's a dotted downforce right across the middle, that it can bow. And when it bows, it may bow in a way that the human eye can't detect, but enough so that it breaks contact right in the middle where it's bowing with your cooler, and then it starts to overheat. That's the theory. I don't know that anybody's proven it. And we're not overclocking it anyway. So this is redundant and unnecessary. I just like to do it, and it's a $9 part. It doesn't seem to cause any harm, but you can break it or cause harm to your board when installing it. And these screws are very, very easy to over tighten. They are on relatively loosely. So when you're unscrewing them, get an idea for how much tension you have to put on the screw to loosen it. It's barely snug. We are going to reuse these screws, and I realize that camera angle is not the best. You're just going to look at the top of my hands. There's no particular order when it comes to taking screws out. It's only when you're putting screws in, unless you're dealing with Red Ripper. That's a different beast. And there's the first half of our top of our socket frame. And the second half. Now I'm going to hold on to these. I'll put them in a Ziploc bag and include it in the motherboard box. In case we want to switch it back to this, we can certainly do that. We are going to need those screws. All four are the same. They don't have to go back in the exact same hole. You can if you want to. And then the socket frame is going to go on. Again, watching the arrow. Now, getting these started is a little tricky. So we'll just drop it in there. Wind it back. You should hear and feel it fall into the thread below. And probably what's happened here is the frame below is probably dropped onto the motherboard box, and now the screw's not long enough to reach it. So having a third hand is pretty useful in situations like this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just drop these in here right now, just because I can. Look how good that looks, though. First, once I put the heatsink on it, no one's ever going to see it. But it'll stay in the video, right? Yeah, so this is the back plate that's fallen loose. So what I'm going to do is just set that down there. And let's see, how am I going to do this? You want to avoid touching any of the metal contact points on the bottom of the board. But you can touch the plate however you like. There's no static discharge to worry about on the plate. You have to get it lined up. It's very hard to do. Again, this ideally wouldn't be the way I would do this in real life, but when making a video, I'm trying to get you a view here that's useful. I can get just two of the opposite corners started. My life would be so much easier. Okay, that's going to hold that back plate in for the rest of this work. And you don't necessarily have to worry about tightening these in a specific order until you get close to the spot where they don't turn. In other words, as they're loose right now, we just don't want them to, we don't want to feel any resistance on them. I've seen some content creators go overboard with how they do this. Basically, as soon as you feel resistance on the screw, back it off a good turn and a half, right? So they're all very loose and it's wiggly. Now, this is the critical part. This is where you want to pick a corner, tighten it so that it's back to the tension you remember feeling it when you took it off, right? So I told you to pay attention to that. It's not loose, but it's also not real tight. I would describe it as a snug fit. And what we can do is we can snug fit the first one, wherever you want to start, right about there, opposite corner, about there, another corner, right about there, and another corner, right about there. Now, if you feel like it's possible you tightened one down more than the other, it's no big deal. You can back them right back off. You go back a little bit further. We don't want this to be tightened down unequally because otherwise it won't sit completely flat and it will create the very problem you're trying to avoid by installing it. You got to love the paradox of this, right? So once again, I'll just pick a corner here, right about there, right about there, right about there. If anything, I might have just tightened that a little too much. Right about there. I'm sure it's probably just fine. You don't want them loose, but you also don't want to over tighten. As for these parts, I'm going to put these in a Ziploc bag and we'll keep it with the rest of the extra components from screws and everything else for the rest of this build, documentation, all that stuff goes in the motherboard box. We keep it all together. So if we ever have to do an upgrade or, you know, swap out a part, we don't have to go digging around for the screws. They're often, depending on who the manufacturer is, screws that work with one manufacturer may not work with another. What else are you going to do with them anyway? So, or you could just throw this in the trash, I suppose, if you think you're confident you're never going to need it. Put it in the recycle bin. Oh, and I'm going to, this is a tool, come on camera. This is a tool you're going to, if you ever want to take this off or adjust it, or you ever want to switch the CPU out, you're going to need this Torx tool, or you're going to need a Torx bit set or driver. So since you've already got the tool, we'll drop it in the bag. Especially if this gets sold to a customer, I want to make sure the customer has everything. Whether or not they've got the skills or the interest, I can't control, but at least they'll have it all. Okay, CPU is in. Now, when we talk about this cooler, look at this monster. Back a little bit here. This is interesting. Now, in theory, we can put this cooler on either this way, or we can put it on this way. It'll work the same. The problem is I don't want these cables visible. And the connectors we need to plug these in are on the back side of the board. So if we run it like this, then the cables, because they're black and the board is black, we can fit them right in that little gap and then run it behind the board. And so I suppose if you looked closely, you'd say, well, it's not exactly projectzero. You can still see some cables. But if we put a liquid cooler on, you'd also see the hoses and the pump power and pump RGB, right? There's not much we can do about that because it has to go to the front. But it's still very, very minimized, and most people wouldn't notice. No, most people wouldn't look that close. But I always want the CPU cooler, whether it's a liquid cooler or an air cooler, I want those cables coming out of this corner up here, regardless if it's plugging into the top or the back of the board. It's just a cleaner look. And you also don't want these cables to somehow get caught up in the fan, so you want to tie up any slack. What is this? Oh, there's a little button here to change the RGB. I guess if you don't have an RGB header to control with the software, you can just set it manually. Cool. All right, I appreciate the manual override. All right, so we're going to take this frame off here. My arms are so extended to get this under the camera. It's very unnatural for me to work like this. So bear with me here under these circumstances. Now, you see we already have pre-applied thermal compound. That's exactly how much you need, the kind you need. You don't need to modify this or add to this, nor should you replace it. The best performance you can possibly get from thermal compound, Intel has already engineered they've done all the work for you. You're likely not going to outsmart the engineers. So I would suggest, remember, this is not experimental computer equipment. You're not at MIT. This is consumer grade components. And they are designed to not require a consumer to have an engineering degree. You're just meant to take it out of the box, plug it in, and you should expect it to perform as advertised. The minute you think you can do better, and if you should start having problems, it's likely your fault. So I'm okay with it if you are, either way. Set that over here for right now. Okay, so here's our back plate. This is going to go behind the board, and it's got some sticky tape to hold it in place for us. Nice touch. You don't have to use this, but it makes the install easier because it won't fall down. You know, like I had to hold that other back plate up for the socket frame. The socket frame isn't really meant to be replaced, so it didn't have any tape on it. Because remember, we're using the original socket frame. We only replaced the top. This is the cooler frame, not to be confused with the socket frame. I'm already confused. Now, this shouldn't have a top or bottom. Essentially, whether you put it on this way or this way should make no difference. If it did make a difference, one side would say top, or there'd be some arrow, but it's symmetrical in a rectangular form, so you can't put it on horizontally. It won't, holes won't line up. Okay, let's go back over to the board, flip it over, and we'll line this up with the holes. And you'll see how it's going. That sticky tape is going to stick to that socket frame. Push down. There, now it won't fall off. Now we can put the cooler on. Just like that. Now, these are thumb screws, but they also have a Phillips head at the very top. So I'll grab my yellow-handled screwdriver you've been seeing for the last 16 years. We just want to get these all started. Once they're all started, I'm going to work our way around opposite corners. If I start feeling a little bit of tension, I don't take it any further. Once I'm feeling tension on all four, this is where things get a little serious, where we want to make sure we're tightening these down opposite corners as much as possible, but we don't want to over tighten and crack the board. They should, if this is a good cooler, it should come to a dead stop. You should be very, it should be very obvious to you when you've bottomed it out. Now, because I've turned that 1, 2, 3, and I'm not hitting the bottom yet, I'm going to go around equally on all sides to avoid any sort of warpage. Come back around. Now it's a dead stop, which is good. Dead stop, which is good. Dead stop. You see how close these are all? They don't have to be exact. If anything, that one was more off than the other three, but just by about half of a turn. So we're good. That should be fine. It's not that much precision required with consumer grade electronics. Close enough is usually good enough. It's too retention. Plug in my OCD here. Keep them separated. Okay. Now, when it comes to hooking this up, these connectors are going to be back here. And our ARGB header, do we have one? It's this way. This says all-in-one pump fan, system fan. Oh, can't see what I'm pointing at. It may help if you pull up documentation. Wow, this is really getting further and further away from me. System fan, pump fan, CPU fan. As for an ARGB header, looks like right here is our ARGB header. So because we're dealing with a CPU fan, that will go on right here. If you don't have an ARGB header, you don't have to hook it up. You can just use the manual switch. If you do hook it up, you can use the RGB software to synchronize your fans and other RGB items that are ARGB compatible. Now, when I mount this into the case, these cables are going to be in the way. I'm going to have to take these cables back off. Keep that in mind, because this has to fit through holes in the motherboard tray on the case, which is, different than most builds. But I don't mind. And then the other thing is, when I set this back on the box, I've got to be aware that I now have cables that could be crushed. I back this off again. These cables now, if I lay the motherboard right on top of the box, I risk damaging the cable or the plug. So I'm going to take it right to the edge. This gets more challenging when we deal with the bigger power supply cables, but they're more robust. They're not as easy to break as these little ones. So just pay special attention to those. Be aware. So, RAM. Guess we can do RAM. Let's see. Usually on the board, they will indicate if you're only using 2 RAM modules, which of the 2, you've got 4 sockets. You're going to use one socket, skip a socket, and use the next one. If you don't see it written on the circuit board, you'll definitely want to check your owner's manual. It will work either way. However, you should follow the manufacturer's recommended instructions if you want to have a recommended experience, right? That looks, I'm going to move that over. Okay, it's right there. Right there. I'll try to zoom in on that for you. So written in very small print on the board right there, it says Well, it's upside down for me. Wow, I can't even read that with my glasses. It's so tiny. So the manual is going to be a lot easier for someone like me. However, I have some higher magnification glasses, so I stubbornly don't have to look at the manual. Oh, dim A, dim A, dim B, dim B. So dim A1, dim B. Okay, I see it now. I don't know how well you guys can see it, but let's see if we can bring this up to the camera since the camera's fully zoomed. You'll notice there's a little line connecting two of them. That's if you're only using two modules. They're essentially saying use those two sockets, all right? And which ones are they representing? The same order they're in on the board, top to bottom. So it's saying use the bottom one and use the second from the bottom. If you're only using two modules, this is the recommended slots to use. If you're using all four, it doesn't matter, right? You can use one for single channel. They don't recommend it. But with memory as cheap as it is these days, I can't see why anybody would want to do that. 2 or 4, not 1 or 3 is preferred. You're leaving performance on the table. If you choose to do that, you can. Okay, brand new RAM. This is our OLOy Blade Performance DDR5 RGB. There's our 2 sticks of 16 gigs each for a total of 32. That's what I think most computers built with 32 today are pretty well spec'd out. 16 is fine for a lot of people. 32 is more than most people will use. And of course, we can go up to, I think, 100 and, what is it now? 96 and 90. Well, I know we can at least go to 32 times 4, 128. And then we probably can get up a little higher than that. But that's overkill and often causes problems when people add more RAM than they need. They oftentimes run into a system that, for example, takes forever to boot up because it's got to check all the RAM when you first turn it on. You're like, geez, my computer used to boot in 5 seconds and now it's taken like 30 seconds. Well, yeah, because you added 128 gigs of RAM. I thought it made it faster. Well, not at boot up. Anyway, spending money to spend money because more is better is just not a good philosophy, in my opinion. Now, the RAM modules only go in one way. We want to align them with the sockets. And everything is black and it's dark and I can't see. So I got to put my glasses back on. That was way off. Don't use any force when putting in your parts. They should go in really easily. Use your thumbs. Once you've verified it's seated in the socket with the notch lined up correctly, push down one corner and then the other corner, just like that. So then we just have this last socket remaining. We're just going to repeat the same process. I would face this towards you, but then I can't see it at all. I'm completely blind. I cannot see this side. So I have to do it this way so I can see it. Once again, with the sticker facing the CPU, you skip a channel here. Thumb, you will see those retention levers go in. Now, this doesn't look RGB. It looks gold or brown, but when you turn it on, this will all light up. In fact, we're ready to do that now because that's our RAM, our storage, and our CPU. That's all we needed to do. We just need to put some power to it and a switch. This is me pushing an imaginary switch so we can fire this up outside of the case. And we can update the BIOS and just verify everything that we've installed is recognized properly and that it boots. This is the best time to find any problems while it's outside of the case in most builds. Actually, in this build, this is harder to do it this way because with all the connectors on the back, as I mentioned earlier. Let's see. Power switch. Let's start with a power switch. I buy these on Amazon. They're really inexpensive. It's got a little LED. If you want to hook it up, you really only need to hook up the power switch for testing purposes. But it's just two more cables, positive and negative, if you want it to light up. Depends how lazy you are or how much you care. Let's move this aside and let's get our power supply unboxed. I probably had this for a couple years. I had to wipe off the dust, can you tell? Okay, documentation. We'll go with the rest of the documentation in the motherboard box when we're done. Underneath the lid, screws are taped. A lot of people miss that because they're looking down in here. These are the screws to hold the power supply in, but they'll probably match the same screws that come with the case. Always good to have extras, though. We've got our power cable. If you build computers for a living, you're going to have lots of extras. These are pretty standard, and we want to see standard. And then we've got finally our bundle of braided cables. It's nice that they're braided, but again, nobody's going to see them. And an empty box, which we can put right over there. Guess I can leave those tied up for now. Add some more tape. Nothing fancy. Nice 750 watt, very affordable. And I think at this point, I'm going to go back to camera one because I think your view is actually quite restricted this way. But at least on the close-up work for everything we've done over here, I think that's really where the close-up camera comes in handy, apart from actually having somebody holding a camera, which we'll get back to that in the newer studio location. So in the meantime, we will march on. March forward. Let me get this turned off and out of my face. It's out of the shot now. Good. Okay. All right, so the fun part when I'm powering this outside of the case is I've got to get the power switch on the back side of the board, and I need to get CPU power and motherboard power onto the back side of the board. Now, because this heatsink is so massive, I think I'll be okay to just put the weight of the motherboard right on there. At least to get the cables hooked up. I don't intend to run the motherboard without the fan being able to get air. Laces. I can't express how surprised I was at the price of this power supply. This should be 80 bucks. So to see it $20 less is a pleasant surprise. I don't know if that's a sale price, but if I was doing more builds, I'd have a few more of these in inventory. But I don't anticipate I'm going to be needing them moving forward. And the inventory I have now is probably more than I need. I'd be happy to be wrong. Okay, so I got that 4-pin connector on. Now this clip, normally on most boards, the clip here goes to the edge of the board. But because the clip, the socket has been reversed, the clip is now on the inside. If we were to flip this over onto the other side, this clip would go towards me. It makes sense when you think about it. Now, because we're plugging this on outside of the case, it's very important you give this motherboard some support as you're pressing down, because you don't want to put any pressure on, say, the heatsink or anything under there that, or even including the box. We don't want to crush the box in. This little 4-pin connector is a little bit challenging to get on there. The good news is once it's on, it should stay on. So there we go. There is a heatsink right underneath this power connector. I turn this around, and that's a great handhold. You'll notice I don't wear an anti-static wrist strap, because if I have any static on me, it's going to dissipate through a heatsink or a heat shield. I don't touch any of the components. I'm always holding components by the edges, or by a heatsink, or by a heat shield if it's strong enough. You'll often find when there's a big air cooler attached, that is my handle to move the board around. You can static shock the heck out of that thing. You're not going to hurt a thing. If you feel better wearing an anti-static strap, don't let me stop you. But if you handle the parts the way you're supposed to, it's overkill and unnecessary. It also helps to not work on carpet, to not wear staticky clothes, to not pet your furry friend and then touch your board. And if you are going to touch the board afterwards, as long as it's a heatsink, heat shield, or your cooler, zap away. Nothing will be harmed except, depending on the zap, you. All right. Now we do have two 8-pin CPU EPS power connectors here. We do not have to use both of them. This is for providing additional power than what engineering recommends from Intel in the case of overclocking. This is not a K series CPU. It cannot be overclocked in that way. And if this is important to you, make sure you buy a power supply that has two 8-pin EPS power connectors. For us, with this build, we could put those on. It won't hurt, but we would spend more for the power supply and see no difference whatsoever. Just so you know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Now, this connector looks very much like it. This is a video card power, GPU power. If you were to add a discrete graphics card, it's a 6-pin connector with an additional optional 2-pin that totals 8. That does not go here. It says PCIe on it. The one we want will say CPU on it. Yeah. And it's two 4-pin connectors, not a 3 and a 2. It's two 4s. And we're going to use both of them here. And then these are labeled CPU power 1 and CPU power 2. And for some reason, the clip is on the outside, which is where it normally is. I don't know why those aren't inverted the same way that one is, but whatever. When we go to mount this in the case, and I want to remind you, this is not normally how I would build this. I would normally build this in the case, but it would be very difficult. I mean, if you think the view stinks now, it'd be worse when I'm working on it, and all you see is the back of the motherboard tray. So because I'm making a how-to video, I want you to see how everything goes together. But all this will have to come off. Any connectors on here need to come off once I put this in the case. So I'm okay with that. I know what's coming. I know what to expect. I don't want to fully deck this out. We just want the minimal necessities. I don't need the RGB on there, but I do need the CPU fan. I need motherboard power. I need CPU power, and I need a power switch. That's it. Apart from a keyboard, mouse, and a monitor, we should be good to go. We don't want to plug in any USB flash drives yet. We don't want to plug in any printers, no internet, nothing but keyboard and mouse and a power switch. Our power connector is still in the same place as it always is. Our front port umbilical headers, or power switch, reset switch, power LED, hard drive LED, they're all located in the same space, just on the other side. And the locations should not be inverted. They should go on exactly the same order. Top row, first two pins would be power LED with the positive cable closest to the edge. Edge of the connector, not the edge of the board. Just like every build you've seen me do, that is an ATX or a micro ATX. The only time this changes is on a mini ITX. Oh, it looks like we had a little disconnect there. I'm not sure how much people missed. That was on my side. That hasn't happened in a long time. I'm going to pause here a minute for you guys to catch up. It looked, oh, yeah, it looked like we lost it for a few seconds here. I'm not sure the last word you heard me say. That was a disconnect on my side, and it doesn't make any sense. That was Mara calling, if you heard the phone ring, to let me know I was offline. I did get a notification pop up on the screen that OBS had disconnected. It was before I plugged in the switch. Okay, David, let me do that again. So the switch connector is in the same exact place it always is. It's flipped on the other side of the board, and the cables are going to go on exactly the same way. It's not inverted. So basically, at the top row, furthest away from the edge here on this first row, at the row, oh, there's two rows of pins here. You're not connecting the top and the bottom. You're only connecting horizontally. And you'll see me do this exactly the same way on every ATX and micro ATX build, Intel or AMD, that I've ever done in the last 15 years. The only time this connection location changes is on a mini ITX board or a pre-built system from some system integrator like Dell or HP. It's always the same otherwise. Okay, with that, this is the tricky part. I'm not worried about this connector being damaged. I'm a little worried about these two. And I do have to flip this over so the CPU fan can turn. So, well, not just turn, but actually breathe. Figure out how I'm going to do this. There's really no workbench available yet that I'm aware of that accommodates for this rear connection. And there is no real standard for the rear connection. This is MSI's version. Asus has their own version. And right now it's sort of experimental. They want to see if they sell before they offer a lot of products. So your choices are very limited at this time. I expect if they sell well, you'll see offerings from ASRock and from Gigabyte. Or maybe I've been out of touch and they're already doing it. I don't know yet. Let's see. Power. I need power and a keyboard and a mouse and to hook video up. And then we can turn this on and see if we get a post. What do you think? Place your bets. Is it going to boot first time? Built it, didn't I? Of course, we could have bad parts. Pretty rare. Can happen. Maybe that RAM's too slow for this system. I don't think it is. I've been wrong before. HDMI. And power. Okay. Okie dokie. That cooler is something else. All these other YouTube channels are missing out because they have to go to the very tippy top. We're one step below, 1.5 steps below the tippy top if you include the KS. Let's see what it looks like. Let's see if it boots. First things first. How do I want to do this? I'm going to hit the power switch first, and then we'll switch over to the HDMI output. I want to see the RGB. I want you to see the fan spinning. Or not. Okay, I'm missing something obvious here. I've got it backwards. Okay. I'm officially an idiot. Everything is backwards. This is the audio header, not the front switches. The front switches are clear over here. Doesn't hurt anything. It's just embarrassing. But if I read the board and I'm paying attention, it clearly says. Also, there's an instruction manual. Feel free to read it. Hey, it's live and unscripted. Would I do that on purpose? Maybe. Maybe I'm just AI. Maybe you are. I should have known. I should have known by looking at it. That pin that's missing is a standard for an audio header. Oops. The connectors still go on the same order. You just got to put them on the right connector. It's little details like this that can be embarrassing. They don't cause any harm other than to your pride. And when you're building alone without a camera on and thousands of people watching, nobody will know if you don't tell them. But hey, they're all good lessons, okay? If it can happen to me, maybe if it happens to you, you don't feel so bad about it. It's not a big deal. All right, let's try this again. Hey, there we go. I see some lights. My LED lights up over here. We're changing colors. My RAM is lit up. And let's go to the HDMI input and see if we get a post screen. Now, the initial first power on may take 90 seconds to 2 minutes. It has to train the RAM, identify the CPU. It does this on the first boot up. So far, this is what we want to see. It changed what was in it before. Nothing. F1 to run setup. Okay, F1. Let's see what it does. Peter VZ with a €1 contribution. Thank you, Peter. Pretty lights. Shiny. Again, that first boot up, it's still training things. Give it a second. Now, I've had this board sitting around here for a few months. So the BIOS I expect to be out of date. I certainly know the BIOS from May 30th won't be on there. That is a beta BIOS. I am going to use the beta BIOS just because I'm curious if it solves the power levels to the Intel chip that they were using by default. If they resolve that, then the air cooler should be okay, I would imagine. So this BIOS looks like it's a little off on the date and time because the manufacturers in Taiwan or China, there's a 12-hour advanced, well, maybe like 15-hour difference in time. We're like 15 hours behind them. So it's almost 3 o'clock on June 7th right here in Phoenix. And you'll see our BIOS date in the upper left says it's almost 6 a.m. Was it that much of a time difference? Yeah, 6 a.m. on Saturday, June 8th. So 6 a.m. minus 3 p.m. is, yeah, about 15 hours. Okay, anyway, over on the right side, very top right side, we're going to get the details of our BIOS version. Now, normally you just put in the latest BIOS. You don't have to put in all the ones in between. So if we look at this, we've got the name of the board. The chip is identified as a 14900, which is right. We should also see 32 gigs of RAM in here. Yep, that's correct. And our BIOS version says we're at version 100. Is that, am I reading that correctly? That would imply the very first BIOS. So we would have been an early purchaser here at a .10. Usually that's what that means. It's the first one. Obviously, there'll be corrections over time. So if we go to the motherboard manufacturer's website under support, we can look at all the past BIOSes and see how many have come out, just if you're curious. We should only need the latest one. Let me go back over to camera one for a moment and show you what I'm going to do. I've already downloaded that latest BIOS before we went live and put it on this empty flash drive. There's only one file on it. I can't pick the wrong file. I'm guaranteeing my success rate is going to be much higher because I can't pick the wrong file. I recommend you follow this, by the way. Now, I can plug into any of the USB ports back here. The BIOS flashback is used if you don't have a CPU or RAM. You can actually flash the BIOS. We've demonstrated that a few videos back. Some motherboards, fancy boards, support that. It's pretty cool. However, this is a faster, better way, and it shouldn't matter if we plug into the blue or the black USB ports back here. Either way, any of the USB ports should work. Now, give that a second to initialize. Let's go back over to the HDMI port capture card. And let me go full screen on my side so I can see it the way you at home see it. Oh, I can read it now. Good. BIOS build is October 31st, 2023. That's, 8 months, 7-8 months ago. I'm sure there's been a lot of improvements. So we're going to go to, let's see, advanced mode. No, we can go right here, mFlash. System will auto reboot and enter flash mode. Do you want to enter flash mode? Yes, please enter flash mode. Can you say flash mode again? Some BIOSes don't require reboot. Some do. This is normal. Depends on the manufacturer and the model. Sometimes MSI, for example, may do it one way with one model of board and another way in another. Just because it's MSI doesn't mean they're all going to be like this. There's only one file it can find because the SSD we installed is brand new. It has no partition and no format. It can't really see anything with the file system other than the flash drive. And look at this. We went from BIOS 100 to 142. We can verify at the bottom that our current BIOS is version 1 from 10/31/2023. We're going to skip everything else and go right to the latest, which is version 1.42, which is a build date of the 29th of May, just about 9 days ago, 8 days ago, 10 days ago. And then we want to make sure the model name of the board matches. It's not going to let you do it anyway, but that's okay. That's what we want. So just a double click or pressing enter on the keyboard and it'll say, are you sure? And yes, I'm sure. And then you just leave the system alone. This may take 3 to 5 minutes. Leave it alone. You'll know when it's done. I don't know how many BIOS updates we've shown on this channel over the last 16 years, but we've never had one fail. We always follow the same instruction. I don't know how many times I've repeated that, but for the benefit of people just joining us who are new to the channel and aren't familiar with our previous content, this is the way we always do it. I recommend you leave the system alone. Don't mess with the keyboard or the mouse. If you're antsy, get up and walk out of the room, wash some dishes, do some laundry, go check the mail, go watch TV for 5 minutes and come back. Just let it do the job you've asked it to do. Don't micromanage it. It may reboot more than once during the process. You will know when it's done. If it seems like it's locked up, leave it alone. If it's more than 20 minutes, then you can be concerned. It actually went faster than I was expecting. If we, hold on a second, let me just check something here. Yeah, okay. So again, we're going to look now in this right corner and verify we have 142 with the build date. This is a beta BIOS. I'm okay with that. Again, because of the PL1 and PL2 power settings, I am concerned about heat on all 13th and 14th gen i7 and i9 CPUs, even i5s, honestly. But particularly with an air cooler, I'm very curious. Intel should not be packaging, nor should AMD, an air cooler that's not capable of cooling the chip they're selling you, unless you're doing something to overclock it. But universally, these motherboard makers have been increasing the voltages as much as quadrupling Intel's recommended spec, which you lose a lot of efficiency. It adds electricity cost, and you only gain a little tiny percent of performance. I hear people say, yeah, but otherwise you're leaving performance on the table. Well, 7% of 5.4 gigahertz, it ain't much difference from a human being's perspective. Mostly benchmark chasers that do this nonsense. It will perform as you paid for it, and it said it would perform at a certain level. And to say, well, I want to get more performance out of it than what I paid for, you will also take on consequences as a result. But when the motherboard manufacturers are adding the voltages by default, that's messed up because most people don't understand that. And it's very confusing for your average user to understand how to fix it themselves. And they shouldn't have to. Only an advanced user, in my opinion, who has the knowledge to change those recommended PL1 and PL2 power level 1 and power level 2 settings should be changing them from the manufacturer default, not the other way around. That's messed up. Okay, let's go to, see here. There's usually a way to tell it what kind of cooler we have. Turn this on because I want to know if the CPU fan stops turning. That should be on by default, in my opinion. The MSI BIOS really throws me because I just haven't used that many MSI boards. Let's go to advanced. Maybe that's what I want. Settings. Overclock settings. Here we go. CPU cooler tuning. Wow, it's actually set correctly. The PL1 is set to 65 watts. And the extreme setting from Intel is no more than 253 watts. And what used to be the default out of the box are the unlimited settings at 4,096 watts. Now you might be falling out of your chair going, that's more than 3 times or 4 times. 4096 is sort of like infinity, right? That means feed it as much wattage as your particular chip, because each chip is different. We call it the silicon lottery. Very rarely do two chips run the same line from AMD or Intel. So what it's saying is give it as much voltage as it'll take until it screams out in pain, and then dial it back from there, or just keep it there. So, you know, you could run a piece of software to tell you what it actually is. It won't be 4,096. That'll be the maximum, which means infinity as far as your CPU is concerned. Because even at 1,000 watts, you'd kill pretty much all CPUs. At least without some extreme specialty, I don't know, nitrogen cooling or something. So a PL1 of 65 is what I want to see, but where's my PL2? See this all just, is there a scroll down? No. We should have a, what's called the PL1, which is the normal sort of, when it's not working and it's idling, we're at 65 watts. And then we can crank it up to 253 watts maximum temporarily as needed for what we call PL2 or the short-term power settings. But when we go to the unlimited, it's going to set them both to infinity. And it means you're going to get, a few percentage points faster, but at what cost? You're going to need more expensive cooling. Your system's probably going to run louder because those fans have to be more aggressive. The lifespan of your chip will be significantly degraded if you do that day after day, week after week. Don't expect to own it for 8 years. I just don't know why anybody would do that. They got more money and time than I do. I wouldn't sell a system to a customer that way. And if somebody sold me a system that way, I would be pissed if I figured it out, or if it was shown to, somebody said, here, let me show you something. That would upset me. Your system's going to run more reliably. You won't need to spend money on a very expensive cooler. It's going to be quieter. It's going to cost less in electricity to run it. It's going to generate less heat. Last thing I need is to put a heater in the room when it's 115 outside. So, imagine an office that has these and they've got 50 of them all in one big room. The electricity cost and the heat that you're battling now with air conditioning for 7% more? No, forget about it. All right, that's my opinion on that, but I still don't get where our PL2 is. I don't know why just PL1. Now, XMP I'm going to leave off until I know the system's stable. Once we have Windows installed and everything looks like it's working, then we can turn that on. Because if things start to crash after that, I'll know why it's causing it. If I turn it on now because I'm impatient, diagnosing any problems will be more complex. It still seems to me it should be in here. I just don't know why PL2 is not in the list. Maybe that's why this is a beta BIOS. I can only assume that when I'm selecting Intel default for the CPU cooler, we would do maybe extreme if we had a liquid cooler, let's say. But in theory, that should be enough for the cooler Intel includes. In theory. The only way to know for sure is to test it like we're doing now. I will say the fan is whisper quiet. This stock OEM fan is not only attractive, I can't hear it at all. Of course, we're also more or less idling, but let's leave that as is. Let's save and exit here. So save and exit. Probably here. So the only thing we changed is to put the warning on if the CPU fan should fail. Although we have a glass panel, we would see that. That's more important if you can't see on the inside, like if you have a regular workstation at an office. But we're good. Let's leave that as is. We are done with the BIOS flash drive. Now, when this goes to reboot, there's nothing for it to boot from. Remember, we have a brand new solid state drive in there with no partition, no format. The solid state drive manufacturer doesn't know if you're going to be putting this in a Mac or Linux or Windows PC, so you have to partition and format it. So let's go back over to camera one for a minute. I've impatiently already unplugged my BIOS flash drive. We never need this file again. I'm going to erase the file on here later. This will be a completely blank flash drive, and you'll see me use it again for another BIOS update. Windows 11 is what we want to put on here. So I've got a Windows 11 installation media. If you want to know how to create one of these legitimately for free, I have a video that walks you through the whole process. Direct from Microsoft, following Microsoft's media creation tool. All the source files come from Microsoft. You know you're not getting any viruses or some questionable source, all right? Now, you will have to pay a license. You will have to buy a license to activate it, but it will run indefinitely without activation with some customization features disabled. And you can do that as long as you want. What I'll do is I will go to VIP CDK deals, where we have a link in our video notes, and I will buy a cheaper Windows 10 Pro key. Windows 11 Pro key costs a couple dollars more. A Windows 10 Pro key works to activate, at this time, Windows 11 Pro, exactly the same way. I don't need to install Windows 10 at all. I just need to make sure that when I'm asked for a product key, I tell it I don't have one. So then it says, okay, since I don't have a product key, I don't know what version of Windows your product key would support. I'm going to pick Windows 11 Pro. It's going to install. We'll do our updates, our drivers. We'll make sure everything works. I'll even put this thing in the case and make it look all pretty. And as long as everything's fine throughout this process, the very last thing I'm going to do is buy a Windows 10 product key. They're about $16.55 US using the coupon code Carey. They're guaranteed. It will tie to this motherboard for the life of the board. So if you have a bad board and you need to send it back and you get a replacement board, you're going to need to buy another license. That's why I wait until I know everything is good. Save that for last. Okay, with that explained, now when I restart the computer, the only bootable drive is that flash drive, and it should automatically start the Windows 11 Pro setup process. Let's see what happens. I'm going to go back over to our HDMI input, and I'm going to do, well, I gotta go full screen. That red X with the right mouse, Carey. That's better. You've not made any changes. Save configuration and exit. Yes, that's fine. We just want to reboot. Control-Alt-Delete or turning it off and back on again. Any of those three ways are fine. But now it should look and say, hey, I've got something to boot from now, without me telling the BIOS to do it. By default, that's how all motherboards should work with factory settings. Now, if that's a used drive that I took out of another system, it may try to boot from it. And we're already up and running with our setup. I click next. You're going to see, if you're a regular to the channel, I always do this the same with Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, Windows 11. Nothing has changed over the years. I do not have a product key is what I select. That's how you get a free trial legitimately from Microsoft that never ends. It's going to give you a watermark down here after some time. And there's some customization to Windows that won't allow you to do without activation. But otherwise, if you don't mind the watermark and you don't mind a lack of some customization, you can use it indefinitely without the license key. But without the license key, which tells Windows what version your license key supports or will activate, it has to ask you this in advance. Like if you're in Europe or if you're educational institution, we're going to do Windows 11 Pro. Some people might want Home. For the price difference, you might as well just go to Pro. If you have Home, you might as well leave it alone. It's not worth it. And then to do the upgrade, rather, we'll agree to the license agreement and hit next. We always choose a custom install. And we're going to see a brand new, what we call unallocated drive. That means there's no partition and no format. We only install one drive, even if we're going to put in 4 or 5. We only install our C drive. Once Windows is installed, then we'll hook up the next, when we power everything off, if everything's good, we'll plug in a second drive. And then we'll go ahead and partition and format that. That'll become drive D. Everything's good. Shut it down. And continue this for as many drives as you have, one at a time, so you can control the drive order. You don't have to go back and correct anything. And if the system stops working or starts crashing, you know it's the last thing you changed that's the cause of the problem, making it much faster to diagnose. When it comes to installing Windows, if I have 4 drives installed, how do I know which of the 4 I'm installing to? It doesn't say Fanxiang on here. What if I have 2 Fanxiangs that are 2 terabytes each? How do I know which slot is which drive? There's no way. So only install one drive, and you can't make that mistake. Next. And it's off to the races with partitioning, formatting, and copying our Windows 11 setup files without any concern of, did I pick the right drive? Whoopsie, I accidentally overwrote my important stuff. You know, I've seen this happen countless times from people that are too impatient, trying to cut corners, trying to do everything at once. Haste makes waste. And I'm in business to earn money. And the more time I spend, the less money I make. And I'll just read up on the chat room here. We're already doing our first reboot. Okay, now on this next reboot, we should get to the out-of-box experience here and finish our regular standard installation process of Windows 11. Gregory Howard wants me to check the email. Absolutely. Great idea. We have a $5 contribution from David Collins via PayPal. Says, keep it up. Thank you, David. Very nice, generous contribution once again from our friend Frankie B. Shout out to Frankie B. Thank you so much. Gregory Howard with an Amazon gift card for $50. Right on, Gregory. Thank you so much. And Michael Powell says, I hope this will help with Studio C, and a very nice, generous Amazon gift card, and it will help. Thank you very much. Again, if you're a member, be sure and remind me on Monday's members only video. Give you a little sneak peek of the condition in Studio C, and you'll see there is a long way to go, but we are making progress. Okay, United States, US, skip a second keyboard layout. I don't have internet. Continue with limited setup. Now I can create a local account, which I'll just call user, because again, this might be going to a customer. I don't want my account on there. Furthermore, I don't have a Microsoft account, nor do I want one. So we can still create that local account. And then for privacy settings, I like to leave location on. That'll set the date and time for me. You'll notice I didn't make any corrections, even though the date and time were inaccurate. They were only off by a few hours. And furthermore, they could have been off by a couple years. It's only when it's excessive, like 30 years or a couple of years backwards, like if it's 30 years forwards or a couple of years forwards, then I would self-correct. But when it's brand new out of the box from the manufacturer, that's not going to happen. That's only going to happen if you're buying a used product or a returned product. So I leave everything alone. Don't fix it if it ain't broke. Let location setting fix it for us. Okay, then it's going to finalize. Now, Paul1961 thinks we're in legacy mode, not UEFI mode. We'll find out here in a minute. I haven't checked the BIOS settings. I've left it at the default settings. So when we're done, we can look at MS Info 32 and see what mode we're in. I usually can tell by looking at the partitions on the drive. If we have 3 partitions on the drive, that would suggest to me we're in legacy mode. 4 partitions will be UEFI mode. And if we're not in UEFI mode, I will reinstall again. I don't want to convert on a brand new build. The install only takes a few minutes, so I'd rather just format, remove all the partitions and start again. I'll be surprised if it did that. But again, I haven't checked the BIOS, but it should be defaulting. The flash drive, I believe, can boot to either or, legacy or UEFI, but it should default to UEFI. Let me take a quick look down here. We'll just right away, before I forget, MS Info 32. And let's see if we're in UEFI. BIOS mode is UEFI. If we want to look at the partitions, again, if we run the setup, if I shut this down, now remember, it can boot to the SSD or the flash drive now, and it's going to default to the SSD. If I want to override that, I need to go in the BIOS and tell it there's usually a boot override. So as we reboot here, I'm going to hit delete over and over right here where the screen is black. And hopefully, if I repeat it fast enough, we get in the BIOS, which we have. And then we can go to, I guess it's going to be, we're in advanced mode. Again, the way MSI lays this out is so confusing to me. Settings. Boot. These are standard boot order, which we can change here. This is all default. What I'm looking for is a boot override. I don't want to permanently change the order and then have to change it back. So maybe under settings, save and exit, there's our boot override. That means just on the next boot only, I want to start from that Windows 11 installation media one more time. And what I want to do is I want to act like I'm installing Windows on a used drive and see if I count 3 partitions or 4. And this won't make any permanent change. I'm going to hit the power supply off switch once I have that information. So again, I go through the same process I've already done until I get to selecting the storage that I want this to install on. And it should tell us now there's 4 partitions on it. Custom install 1, 2, 3, 4. So if this was in legacy mode, we'd just have 1, 2, and 3. That's all I needed to know. And with that, just to go back to camera 1 so you can see, I just need to cut power. I've made no changes and I've not written anything to the SSD. We've only looked at it. I'm done with the Windows 11 media. I'll turn this back on and find the switch. Power it back up again. What have I done? Now it's back on. There it goes. Heart attack. All right, switch back over to our HDMI input. The next thing we need are the drivers. Now, they gave us a driver DVD, which is so weird. That is so weird. How do they expect you to use it? Now, yes, we can go get a USB DVD drive. In fact, I have 3 of them for just such an occasion, but I still feel like those drivers are out of date. So which drivers are we missing, right? That's the first thing I want to know. So without anything else plugged into the board, we were leaving everything minimal. I'm going to right click on the start menu and I'm going to go to the device manager here and see what's missing. Now, some of these items we may not be able to identify. They may be just unknown. Okay. And if you had an AMD system, a lot of this is resolved by putting the AMD Adrenalin software on, which gets updated constantly. You wouldn't want to load that off a DVD. And everybody's got broadband these days. You just log online. Go grab it. It's free. We have our network controller is missing a driver. So we can't even plug into the internet to get the driver. Aha. So now what do we do? PCI device. We don't know what this is. SM bus controller. That's going to be part of the Intel chipset. And some of these will automatically update through Windows Update. Some of them may not. This looks like our Ethernet controller, and I'm going to guess that's our Wi-Fi. So if that's the case, how do we get online if this is the only computer you have, right? So if I had a different computer, I think it's pretty obvious, and it should go without saying, that I could go to the motherboard manufacturer's website, download the latest drivers onto a flash drive on the other computer, plug it in and start loading them. Maybe start with the Ethernet driver, and you can get the rest yourself on this computer. Or you get yourself one of these USB to Ethernet adapters, which you'll find very handy with modern day slim laptops no longer coming with an Ethernet adapter. If you're somebody who's working on computers a lot, these are like 20 bucks. And if you buy a quality one, like this one is the, I think this is from Ugreen. Ugreen, the letter U and the word green put together, makes some very nice stuff. And I want to say this is Ugreen, but there are some alternatives. It's not the only one, but it would defeat the point if we had to load the driver. Now, this is a 2.5 gig adapter. I really don't need that. But it should, Windows 11 should auto-detect it. I should have a regular 1 gig adapter. Yeah, there's the 1 gig adapter. And the reason I would go with the 1 gig is that if there's going to be a driver problem, it'll be on the newer one. The older one, I can guarantee when I plug this in, Windows is going to auto-detect it, load the driver. I can plug the Ethernet in, go on Windows Update, and then grab all those other drivers. Once I have the network driver installed, wired or wireless, I can unplug this. Or I can leave it plugged in, it doesn't matter. But that's what happens when you're using the latest and greatest technology is these drivers are not yet commonplace in Windows. They will be in time. So we can pick any USB port, plug that in, and then grab our Ethernet cable and plug that in. Give Windows a second to identify and load the driver, and we can move forward. It's no big deal. It's very inexpensive. They're great to have extras. You stick it in a drawer where you can find it. And if you're helping a friend or you reset your computer, you'll be prepared even if you didn't plan for that to happen. It's a reasonable thing to have on hand. Or once you get it up and running, go to the manufacturer's website, download their drivers, put it on a flash drive called drivers, and put it in your motherboard box. So even if they're out of date, you at least get your Ethernet driver up and running, and then you can get the latest version of all the others, or just load all the old ones. Or use this stupid DVD, which is noisy and bulky and unreliable with guaranteed old drivers. Plug a USB drive, DVD drive into the computer. Those cost about the same, 25, 30 bucks. Lots of different ways to solve this. Let's see if this driver loaded. Let's go back over to the HDMI input. And I have to go full screen over here so I can see it the way you do. And now that little globe that was down here is now a little PC, so we have a connection. Great. So the first thing I want to do is just go to Windows Update and let's see how many of these drivers Windows Update is going to provide to us. And then we'll manually grab what's ever left. Some people freak out at this. It's really not a big deal. Lots of ways to change this. And a lot of the drivers may be located here in the optional updates. That looks like our network card right there. And wow, we need a lot of updates. And these are mostly going to be drivers, Intel drivers, Realtek drivers, more Intel drivers, Qualcomm drivers, MicroStar. I don't know what this is. Drivers, drivers, drivers. Actually, not many updates to Windows in this list. It's mostly missing drivers. Whether or not that's all the drivers, we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, let me check my power plan, make sure that this isn't going to go to sleep on us. Yeah, I don't want that monitor going off while we're live. And then I don't like the little cartoony thing down here on the search bar. So I type in search permissions or just start typing it and the suggestion comes up. And then scroll all the way to the bottom, this last option under more settings, show search highlights. That's how you do that on Windows 11. Now, my internet connection, admittedly, is pretty slow here in Studio B, which is another thing I hope will improve in Studio C. So this will probably go faster for you. What is this box back here? Oh, this is nice. So now, because we have internet, there's an option in the BIOS to have this pop up and offer to download the drivers for you. However, this is great if you want to make sure you have the latest drivers, or if there's any drivers Windows did not provide, this will provide it for you. But I don't want to do both at the same time. So I'm going to let Windows Update do its thing. I'm going to ignore this for right now, and hopefully it'll pop up again. And then we don't have to manually go to the manufacturer's website. Not that that's a big deal. This is just how they've improved things over the years. Okay, does anybody have any anxiety or concerns about dealing with the missing driver situation when the main driver you need to get the rest of the drivers is the Wi-Fi or the Ethernet adapter? It's not a big deal. Bikeman wants to know, if you're using an Ethernet most of the time, should you disable your Wi-Fi? Typically, you can't use both at the same time. Typically, your Wi-Fi automatically disconnects when it senses you've got a LAN connection already connected. If you want to play it extra safe, you can go in the control panel under the networking section, look at the adapters, right-click on the Wi-Fi and choose disabled. Or you can come down to the bottom. Oh, I don't have the other screen up. If you see the little Wi-Fi signal, which you probably won't see because it's automatically turned off when you're wired in, it should be doing all this for you. So at the end of the day, it's how you choose to respond to it. If I'm never going to use the Wi-Fi adapter on this board, you might as well just right-click on the adapter and choose disable. But if this board's going to a customer who might want to use it, just leave it alone. It's going to turn itself on or off automatically. If you notice on the bottom right corner when we go to the desktop, we get the little monitor. That indicates a wired connection is established. If I unplug the Ethernet cable, you're going to see the bars. When we click on that, you can turn the Wi-Fi on and off through there as well. But when that option isn't there, it's because the Wi-Fi is already off. But if you want to make doubly sure, you're like, I'm never going to use it, save the resources and disable. Sure. And then when you do go to use it, remember you disabled it, or you'll be beating your head against the wall trying to figure out why it's not working. See how we're doing. So this cumulative update, wrong mouse. This cumulative update is a big update. So it's going to take a while to download on my side. The display driver is always a big driver, but it's nothing compared to the cumulative. That's going to take a minute. All of these cumulatives generally take a while, even on the fastest computer. It doesn't help that my download speed makes it more painful because it can't even begin to install until it gets the file. So we have to be patient and wait. But while we're waiting, and we are a little over time today, let's go ahead and finish this part up and we'll pick up a part 2 later, another day. In the meantime, if you have questions, please ask them in the chat room now where we're waiting. If you've asked a question earlier and I didn't answer it, it's likely because I didn't see it. So do ask it again. Retro Console says everyone has a Wi-Fi dongle, CD-ROM, or an extra computer or a laptop. That's not true, but you could use a USB Wi-Fi dongle as an alternative to the wired USB adapter I used, which I failed to mention. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I wouldn't assume that everybody has one. I'd say most people don't. But it kind of depends. The most people maybe that watch these kind of videos will, but your average home computer user probably wouldn't. Now it says we can restart now. I'm not a big fan of doing that while updates are downloading, but I'm in a mood. So let's just do it. Mats Olov says hello. Hey, welcome in, Mats Olov. Good to see you, my friend, joining us from Sweden. Aren't updates fun? Retro Console says even if you use a Windows 10 key, that key might still have an expiration date. No such thing exists, nor has ever existed in any Microsoft product. There is no such thing as a key expiration date. You just made that up. So if you have any official link from Microsoft that mentions an expiration date going back to the founding of the company on a product key, I'd love to see it. So unfortunately, the internet is rife with false information that people choose to believe because they don't know any better. We certainly don't want to propagate false information based on conjecture and gossip. The fact is, no such thing has ever existed. There's no basis for which to you to say that. And anybody who believes that, you are falsely providing them with unrealistic expectations. If you put a Windows 10 Pro product key on Windows 11, it activates for life of the motherboard. But no different than Windows 11. So the same was true in Windows 95, 98, Windows, all versions of Windows when they started requiring activation keys. It's never been an exception. Prove me wrong. Show me official links from an official source, not some guy on Reddit, not some content creator, but the actual manufacturer. No such information exists officially because it's not true. All right, so I'm going to point out when you guys want to spout false information that you believe, you want to believe it, knock yourself out. There's no precedent for that belief. All right, let's go back to full screen for me over here and back to Windows Update so we can see where we're at. I also want to check the device manager out. I'm assuming my network card driver loaded. Oh, all the drivers loaded. Beautiful. That means I no longer, hold on, let me go back to camera one. I want you to see. I no longer have to use, I can if I want to. I don't have to use this anymore. And you'll notice when we go back to the desktop, it'll be a globe or it'll be those little Wi-Fi lines. Now that the Wi-Fi driver is loaded, let's see what it shows us. It shows us the globe. I don't see the Wi-Fi. Yeah, right here. There's our Wi-Fi lines. And then if we hit the arrow, we should see, remember, I don't have the antenna plugged in, so we're going to see a few options. But that's going to automatically disable itself once I plug the Ethernet cable directly into the back of the board here. Now that the driver's installed, we should watch that globe turn to a little PC monitor here. Just 1 second. And we can verify that we are connecting at 2.5 gig. because I have a 2.5 gig switch I'm plugging into, and the network cable is also 2.5 gig compatible. So give that just a second. Yep, it did what it's supposed to do. Right click, diagnose network problem. No, that's not what I want. Let's try it again. Right click, network and internet settings. Is it status? No, Ethernet. And scroll down and we should see a 2.5 gig connection. Yeah, 2500 up, 2500 down. Perfect. Okay, so back over to Windows Update. And now we can get those cumulatives. Now, there could be newer drivers available. This isn't as critical as it used to be. But if you get your drivers from MSI, they're the ones that MSI approves, which may be newer than what you're getting from Windows Update or not. It might be the same version. If it ain't broke, I'd say don't fix it. Everything looks good. Video drivers come out relatively frequently, so I always want the latest ones. But Wi-Fi, network, sound, stuff like that, I don't worry too much. Chipset drivers don't usually get updated very often anymore, unless it's updated for a newer chipset version that uses the same driver pack. Like, say, we went from a 690 chipset to a 790 chipset. It may be the same driver set with a newer version to accommodate for the 790. That would make no difference for you on a 690 or 590. So in that case, having the latest version isn't really updating you at all. You just don't know, but it also shouldn't hurt you to have it if it makes you feel good. Okay. Chat room's gotten quiet. Final chance to ask your questions. I think once this update's done, we're going to sign off for today. We're probably going to end up going an hour over the normal 2-hour broadcast time, but I think worth it to be as thorough on this as I can be. And we got a lot done, right? We've unboxed brand new products. I still need to test the Intel cooler. We don't have time for that today. I've also noticed the Intel logo is sideways on the cooler. Why is it sideways? Does it rotate? Oh, that's freaky. Whoa. How does it do that? Oh, well, that's something I'll have to make a video about later. If you've ever seen the wheel of a Rolls-Royce, a modern-day Rolls-Royce, in the center of the wheel, in the hub, is the Rolls-Royce double R, overlapping R logo. And no matter how fast the wheel turns, the logo does not turn. It always stays upright with the RR facing the proper direction. It's freaky. This reminds me of that on this Intel stock cooler. The center part of it that highlights the word and lights up the word Intel can spin around, and is it spinning? Yeah, it's spinning with the fan, but the logo's staying in whatever orientation I put it in, despite the speed of the fan. There's a word for this technology. I think Rolls-Royce, I don't know that they invented it, but it's probably something a lot of people don't even notice. But if you ever get an opportunity to drive alongside a modern day Rolls-Royce, notice that the little double R's in the center of all the wheels, it kind of wobbles a little bit left and right. You can tell it's turning, but it's always upright at all times. It's pretty darn cool. All right, back over to the chat here. You guys want to see that? Well, I guess we can switch over to, I guess I can go back over to the close-up camera. That'll be the best way to show it to you. I don't think watching Windows updates is that exciting, right? So give me a second here when I turn this camera, the overhead camera, back on and readjust it. And again, apologize for any motion sickness that's about to occur, but I can at least do this part before I activate the input on OBS here. So just bear with me for a second. Now, with that turned on, let's go back to close-up camera. Okay, so you see this logo? It was facing, okay, this is spinning with the fan. And I wanted it facing, you know, all the other words because this is going to go up right in the case. You see how it's wobbling? That's because the fan, if I put my finger on that, that's spinning like a record. And it'll settle down and stay in whatever orientation I just moved it in. Just give it a minute and it'll settle down and it'll stay right there. Zoom in a little bit more. Which way do I got to go? This way? So I want it facing that way. I can feel the fan spinning. See, when I stop this, the fan still spins behind it. You see how it wants to spin? But I'm not stopping the fan. That's, wow, that's really cool. So just give it a minute to settle down. Is anybody else on YouTube shown this? Everybody goes for the 14900K or, you know, some processor that's overclockable with the K, and they will not come with coolers. You have to provide those yourself. Those are enthusiast chips. I would still say this is an enthusiast chip. But for people that don't want to spend that much money or do that much work. That's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Why is nobody talking about this? What am I missing? Ben Laird said that's a cool cooler, right? Right? Jimmy says that's freaky. It is freaky. Jason says, is it magnets? Oh, I'm sure it has something to do with magnets. If you look up the Rolls-Royce hubs on the wheels, there's a video that details, like an engineering channel that details how that works. All right, let's go back over to our input here and see what's going on with our update. And I'll turn the overhead camera back off and get it out of the way. Yeah, it took me that long to realize. Again, that just goes to show you everything I'm doing is real. It's genuine. There's nothing scripted or prepared. I mean, that's been like that since I installed it, and it took me this long to notice. That's okay. That's pretty fast for me. I might not have noticed until I had it in the case, and I said, hey, the logo's sideways. Now, I'm assuming that logo will stay in whatever orientation I leave it in, even if I power it off. Otherwise, it's going to be upsetting. I imagine the magnets lock it in. So it's still very cool. Very, very cool. Unnecessarily complicated from an engineering standpoint, because once you lock it in, why would you ever want to move it again? So if it was just something I could rotate, that'd be good enough. It doesn't have to do what it's doing to that level. But hey, I'm not complaining. It doesn't seem to hurt anything. A difficult thing to demonstrate once it's in the mother, you know, once you've got the case closed. It's a weird thing to show people. And again, has nothing to do with your PC performance, reliability, or security. It's just fun. Okay, let me go back to the chat. It looks like my chat is not updating here on my tablet. I don't know why. Bear with me for a second, because I suspected that was happening, but now I've verified it's definitely happening. Okay, now it's working again. I don't know what that was all about. So I want to thank everybody that's a member or moderator here. Of course, Mara for her help setting up today's video, the thumbnail, the notes have been updated while we're live. She's been updating the notes. and all the contributors that have made it possible for me to buy these components. Everything you see here was purchased with money contributed by users like yourself, so we can independently purchase what we want, review how we want, when we want, without any repercussions from the manufacturer telling us what we're allowed to say or when we have to make the video. I really like that independence. It's more real life to being a real technician. And there's enough YouTube channels making commercials, in my opinion. We don't need to add to that. What else? Mara wants me to take a close-up picture of that cooler lit up. Okay, I can do that right now. Step around here. How pretty that's going to look, but I think she wants to add it to the thumbnail. Let me do it this way and she can crop it. There you go. And what else? I want to thank again Michael Powell, Gregory Howard, Frankie B, and David Collins for your gift cards and PayPal contributions. You guys rock. Again, a thank you to all the members. A special shout out to Oystein, Buster, Frankie B for their continued incredible generosity. It's so appreciated. But to anybody even just participating in the chat and in part of our community, you know, this wouldn't be near as exciting with just 5 people, you know. The community to me is more valuable than the content by far, and I can't really put a price on it. So we appreciate you being a part of it. We have just an incredible community here that's very uncommon in my experience online with so many nasty people. Our community's friendly, and we're always welcoming more friendly people. You're always welcome here, unless you're rude or mean, in which case you're not welcome here. It's a pretty low bar, though. Like, we don't care about your age, your race, your gender, your political beliefs. None of that matters. It doesn't matter what country you're in. All that matters is you're nice. And as long as you're nice, come on in. We'd love to have you. A reminder, our friends over at Acronis, our friends over at RoboForm, and our friends over at VIP CDK Deals that sell Windows and Office license keys all offer you guys 30% off. All have trial products. All are guaranteed. All those details and links and product coupon codes are in the video notes below every single video of mine. Please do check out the notes. Remember, like even during today's broadcast, Mara has been updating those notes. So if you looked at them earlier, once this video is over, those should be the final notes. There might be some information in there that was not in there if you were looking at that much earlier in the broadcast, just FYI. We will be making a part 2 to this video where I put the motherboard into the case and we can test the cooler and determine if we need that EK all-in-one or not. We also want to verify what our PL1 and PL2 settings are when we're doing that cooler test to identify if the problem could be the cooler, if there's a problem, or if the problem could be the motherboard giving us higher PL2s than we should see. Because I couldn't find the PL2 settings in the BIOS. In that regard, that's weird. Maybe again, because it's a beta BIOS, I don't know. But it's a good start. The fan has been whisper quiet. I have never heard this fan crank up at all, ever. Normally during one of those cumulative updates, you will hear a fan kick on. Some of them, when they install, can be pretty resource intensive. So either that's just a really quiet fan and or it's a really effective cooler and it doesn't need to speed up. I don't know until I run those tests, but those tests are going to take another hour or two between getting the motherboard in the case and then running those tests. So we'll save that for a whole nother video, or this is going to be 6 hours long. So we're already an hour over the normal. And you will find when we did the other projectzero build, the micro ATX build with AMD, that one also ran long. Because it's so different in so many ways, there's a lot of things to take under consideration. So again, a thanks to all of you for hanging out with me today. I'm going to go back over here to camera 1 so I can officially say thank you for watching. I will be back as soon as time allows. maybe a video over the weekend. I don't know yet. Part 2 to this will probably be, I'm going to guess, next Friday. I'll save this. I'll put it aside. I won't do any more work to it, so it'll be in the same state. And then sometimes I have a problem deciding what to do on Fridays. This will make it less stressful for me. We'll do our regular Mondays only, members only rather, Monday videos that are live. So we talk a bit about behind the scenes. It's a much smaller audience. Those videos are never, ever made out to the public. It's just for me and the supporters to hang out and have some one-on-one time for them to show my appreciation for their generosity in supporting the channel financially. But even if you can't or you don't, whatever reason, we're still happy to have you here on the public videos. But no, that's always an option for you. Once you sign up, you can go back and see all the videos you've missed. There's a lot of behind the scenes, what's going on. And every once in a while, I might show off some products that I don't feel are public worthy maybe, or maybe I'm gauging interest before I decide if I want to make a public review of some of these gadgets I've got. So members get that opportunity to sort of pipe in their opinions and help guide the direction of the channel in that regard. So again, I can't thank all of you enough. I will see you all very, very soon. And until next time, bye for now.